Look what happened on a beach here in Florida last week. A fisherman was approached by a beach inspector for collecting bait that cost 0 cents. 0 cents. And it works so well that local authorities have placed a legal limit on the amount each person can take per day. Meanwhile, the nearest fishing store sells the same thing for $2 a unit. The same little thing the beach gives you for free. Think about that for a second. This bait, which the old fishermen here mastered with their eyes closed, passed down from father to son for decades, has been slowly forgotten because the industry doesn't profit from it. But who still knows how to use it? They fish incredibly well. If this is your first time here, subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any secrets the industry tries to hide. Let me tell you what happened on the Outer Banks, in North Carolina, one winter morning. Two fishermen arrived on the same beach at the same time, setting up camp about 20 meters from each other. The first one had the complete kit, a $350 surf rod, an imported reel calibrated for long casts, and a tackle box that cost $160. Artificial jigs from the best-known brands on the market, synthetic scent spray, imported silicone lures. A serious guy, equipped for war. The second one arrived with an old coffee tin and a simple wire sieve that looked about 15 years old. He walked barefoot along the edge of the wet sand, spent about 12 minutes stirring the foamy area where the wave breaks and recedes. He returned, he set up his rod, he cast. First hour of fishing. The guy with the expensive equipment, 0 fish, not even a nibble. The guy with the old tin can, 4 pompano fish in a cooler, each weighing between 1 and 2 pounds. He kept fishing. Second hour. First fisherman. A pull, he tugged, lost it in the surf. Second fisherman, 3 more pompano waves and 2 whiting waves. The cooler was filling up. At the end of that day, the score was this. Guy with the expensive bait, 2 fish. Guy with the old can, 17. Same beach, same tide, same cold northeast wind, same fish swimming by. The only difference was the bait. And the bait for the guy with the old can was sand fleas, mole crab, sand crab, Emerita talpoida, that tiny, oval, sand-colored creature, 2 centimeters long, that buries itself in the wet sand faster than you can see. Now comes the part most people don't know. In several American states, the collection of sand fleas on public beaches is regulated by law. In California, the limit is 50 per person per day, and taking more than that is an infraction. In certain protected areas of Florida and Georgia, collection is prohibited at certain times of the year. Why? Because sand fleas are part of the coastal ecosystem. Because surf fish depend on them as a staple food. Because they work so well as bait that if everyone collected them without limit, it would break the food chain. On the beaches. Look at the paradox. The most effective lure for beach fishing on the American coast is regulated by law because it works so well. And in its place, the market offers you artificial jigs at $12 each and synthetic aroma spray at $9 per small bottle, all trying to imitate what the sand flea does for free. This is not a coincidence. It's a business model. This sand flea trick is just a small piece of what the old fishermen of this coast carried in their memory. Knowledge that was gradually pushed into oblivion. I've gathered what matters most from all of this in the book High-Level Fishing, The Water Game. There you will learn how to read the water, fresh or salt, and identify where the fish are before casting your line. How to understand underwater structure, current, tide, water flow. Where exactly the fish are positioned depending on the temperature, light, and pressure of the day. The mindset that separates those who try from those who decide. Because good fishing is about decision, not luck. Everything straight to the point, without beating around the bush, the way it should be taught from the beginning. The link is in the description. Now, what exactly is this little creature And why does it function the way it does? The sand flea, scientifically known as Emerita talpoida in the East and Emerita analoga in the Pacific, is a crustacean that spends its entire life in the surf zone, that strip of wet sand right after the wave breaks. It buries itself in the sand as the wave approaches, filters what the water brings while submerged, and reappears as the wave recedes to breathe. Bury, emerge, bury, emerge. The rhythm of the tide, its entire life. Beach fish know exactly where it is. Pompano, whiting, redfish, sheepshead, corbina, surf perch. A huge list of species actively hunt sand fleas. Not as a second option, as a preferred food. The pompano specifically has the mouth anatomy designed for this. Ventral mouth, hard jaw, ideal for digging in sand and catching buried crustaceans. It's not a recent adaptation. It's the evolution of thousands of years of coexistence between predator and prey. Native fishermen of the American coastal regions knew about this creature long before colonization. Indigenous communities of the East Coast and the Pacific routinely used sand crustaceans as bait. When the first immigrants arrived and began fishing on American beaches, they learned from those who were already there. This knowledge was passed down through generations, from fisherman to fisherman, from father to son, from grandfather to grandson, until the modern fishing industry began to grow and replace what was free and functional with paid products. The old fishermen of St. Augustine, Florida, called them sand dung. The fishermen of Santa Cruz, California, knew that the right bait was buried in the first few feet of wet sand on the beach. They didn't need a product catalog. They needed to know where to look. This knowledge didn't disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because it's no longer useful to the market. Why does it work this way, biologically? Here's where things get interesting. Surffish have an olfactory system that's difficult to put into human perspective. The pompano detects chemical compounds dissolved in water at concentrations of parts per billion. 1 part per billion. Think of it this way. It's like smelling a drop of lemon juice dissolved in a full Olympic swimming pool. And it's not just smell. It's a combined system, smell, taste, and lateral line, that processes the surrounding environment in real time at all times. When a live or freshly caught sand flea enters the water on a hook, it begins to release a chemical profile that the fish instinctively recognizes. Free amino acids, glycine, taurine, alanine, betaine. These compounds are part of the natural biochemical makeup of crustaceans and are the same ones that the fish has learned to associate with food over thousands of years of evolution. The fish's brain doesn't process it as possible food. It processes it as real food available now. But there's another detail that most people don't know. Disturbed sand fleas, placed on hooks under stress, release additional compounds that crustaceans emit when attacked by predators. These compounds act as a warning signal within the surf zone ecosystem. Where a crustacean is being disturbed, predation is happening. And active predation attracts more predators. It's a chain reaction of biological triggers. Artificial lures with fragrance attempt to mimic some of this. They capture 1 or 2 key amino acids and stop there. Natural bait releases the complete profile. Dozens of compounds in just the right proportions. The way it evolved to look exactly like what it is. No laboratory replicates this perfectly. It can get close, but the fish notices the difference. It always has. And there's a third factor that almost no one mentions: texture. Fish like pompano, whiting, and sheepshead bite the lure and test it before swallowing. If the texture doesn't match what their instinct expects, they spit it out. Silicone lures don't pass this test. Sand flea does, because it is literally what it should be. The old fishermen didn't know the technical names. They didn't know what amino acids, lateral lines, or chemosensory receptors were, but they knew it worked. And this consistent result, generation after generation, is what transformed sand flea into knowledge passed down carefully, almost like a family secret. Now, the step-by-step instructions: how to collect, prepare, and preserve. You go to the surf zone, that strip of wet sand right after the waves foam. You stand still, observing. When the wave recedes, you look closely. You'll see small V-shaped movements in the sand, as if something is burying itself at high speed. That's where the sand fleas are. Basic hand technique. Wait for the wave to come and go. When the water starts to flow back, you push your open hand into the wet sand in a sifting motion. Fingers spread, hand cupped, sand passing through your fingers. With about 10 minutes of practice, you'll get the hang of it. In 20 minutes, you'll have enough for an entire fishing trip. A sand flea sieve is a wireframe with a fine mesh screen that you pass through the sand in rhythm with the waves. You can find them in fishing stores in coastal areas for about $5. With it, you can collect on a large scale, quickly. But, and this but is important, check local regulations before collecting anything. In California, the limit is 50 units per person per day. Some beaches within state and federal parks prohibit collection altogether. Fishing in a conservation area? Check. Not because you'll get arrested for a sand flea, but because these rules exist for a real reason. It's the sand fleas that feed the food chain you're going to fish for. How to keep them alive. Place them in a bucket or can with wet sand from the beach itself. Don't use just seawater. They don't survive well that way. Moist, wet sand in the shade will last the entire fishing day. Need to use them the next day? Wrap them in a plastic bag with a little wet sand and store them in the refrigerator at 4 degrees Celsius. They'll last 2 days like that without any problem. And what happens when the beach doesn't allow you to collect fish? Or when you go fishing in an area with no beach access and coarse sand? Alternative 1. Bait shops on the Florida and Texas coast frequently sell live sand fleas during pompano season. $2 to $3 a dozen. Still cheap compared to any artificial jig. Alternative 2, the one the old fishermen used when they couldn't access the beach, is fresh small shrimp. Smaller shrimp, bought at a fish market or Asian supermarket, cut to the right size and used very fresh. It's not identical to sand flea, but the crustacean chemical profile is similar enough. It works very well for whiting, sheepshead, and surf perch. Alternative 3, fiddler crab. A small, fiddler-like crab, sold in many bait shops in the eastern United States. Works especially well for sheepshead fishing on structures, piers, jetties, bridge pillars. How to hook it. For live sand flea, pass the hook through the back part, that stiffer area that looks like a small paddle. Leave the point sticking out on the dorsal side. Do not pass it through the soft middle body. It will break and come out during casting. Hook size, number 1 to 1.5 for adult pompano, number 2 for smaller whiting. A detail that few mention. When you're collecting them, separate the females. The female sand flea carries a mass of orange eggs on her ventral side. It's clearly visible. These eggs release additional compounds that make the fish even more reactive. When you have a choice, use the female first. If you want to boost your results beyond the basics, there are 3 simple things that old-school fishermen did, without knowing why, but saw results every time. First, about 15 minutes before attaching the fish to the hook, throw a pinch of kosher salt or coarse sea salt into the can with the sand fleas. The stress from the salt causes them to release more chemical compounds. When they enter the water, they start releasing chemical signals from the very first second. Instead of needing time to release the smell, they arrive already active. Second, a few drops of sardine oil in the sand in the bucket. Before fishing, it mixes the smell of oily fish with the smell of crustaceans, 2 different points of attraction acting at the same time. Sounds exaggerated? Ask any beach fisherman with more than 20 years of experience in Clearwater or Fort Myers what they add to their bait. You'll hear exact variations of this idea. Third, some people add a little clam juice, that liquid from shellfish that comes in a bottle, found in any supermarket, to the sand bucket before going fishing. Shellfish and crustaceans belong to the same olfactory universe that beach fish recognize as food. The combination increases the attraction radius in the water. 3 of the fish's senses are activated simultaneously: smell with the amino acids from the crustacean, taste with the actual texture at the moment of the bite, and the lateral line detecting the movement of the live creature on the hook. No off-the-shelf product covers all 3 aspects together. Now, why doesn't anyone teach you this in fishing? Stores? Direct answer: because you can't charge for that. The fishing industry in the United States generates over $38 billion a year. A considerable portion of this value comes from lures, scents, and accessories that exist to solve problems that free sand flea already solved centuries before the first bait shops opened. A set of pompano artificial jigs from the best-selling brands costs between $12 and $25 and loses effectiveness after 1 or 2 fishing. Trips, sand flea, $0. It works as long as you know where to get it. Synthetic scent sprays, sold for $9 or $12 a small bottle, attempt to replicate the chemical profile of live crustaceans. They capture some compounds. They leave out most. And the fish notice. But you buy them because nobody has shown you the alternative. It's not that the manufacturers are bad characters in the story. It's that their business model works best when you don't know what the old fishermen knew. When that knowledge circulated within communities, family, neighbors, local fishing groups, the industry had a natural limit. When that knowledge was forgotten, replaced by well-done product marketing, the market grew unchecked. The fish haven't changed. The beach hasn't changed. The sand flea hasn't changed. What has changed is access to knowledge for those who came before. When using it in water, there are details that make a real difference. Basic surf rig, floating hook, a float bead, or small. Orange or yellow buoy, about 5 centimeters above the hook. This keeps the bait slightly suspended above the sand, exactly at the height that pompano and whiting hunt. A 2 to 3 ounce bottom weight to withstand the surf without dragging. Nothing else is needed. Simplicity is key. Cast beyond the second wave break. Beach fish, especially pompano, stay in the channel between the first and second breaks, or beyond the second. Casting too short puts the lure in the area of agitated foam, where there are rarely any fish of any size. The most productive time window: 2 hours before and 2 hours after high tide. This isn't some old fisherman's superstition. It's water dynamics. When the tide rises, it pushes the sand fleas inward along with the water mass, and the fish follow this movement. At the peak and beginning of the receding tide, the return flow creates currents that concentrate food in specific zones. It's during these windows that most strikes occur. Northeast winds on the East Coast, especially from October to March in Florida, create what local anglers call pompano weather: colder water, greater turbulence, and more active fish searching for food. Sand flea in these conditions is, in practice, unbeatable bait. The old anglers of Jacksonville and Daytona knew that when the wind shifted to the northeast, the fishing reached a new level. For sheep's head fishing on a pier or jetty, no float, hook firmly attached to the structure. Sheep's head don't hunt in open spaces. They cling to pillars, rocks, and crevices, cast about 2 handspans from the structure, and wait. Sheep's head bite carefully, chewing before swallowing. When they feel slight, steady resistance, set the hook firmly. For corbina and surf perch in California, the analogous emerita, the Pacific sand flea, is the #1 bait for both species. The corbina has an underset mouth and a feeding technique identical to the eastern pompano. It was designed to eat sand crustaceans. It works with the standard surf rig in the surf zone, high tide. Mistakes I see every time. First, casting too far. New anglers think distance is an advantage. In surf fishing with sand flea, it's not. The fish are in the surf, sometimes 30 meters away. An excessive cast takes the lure out of the spot. Second, avoid using old sand flea in the water. Over time, the bait loses its active chemical profile. Change it every 15 to 20 minutes if there are no bites. Fresh bait makes a difference in the IU. Result? Third, a static rod in the holder while you distract your attention. Sand flea fishing in surf requires occasional movement, not constant retrieval, but a light tug every 2 or 3 minutes reactivates the scent and the stimulus of movement. The old-timers did this by instinct. It was a habit of trained fishermen. And if you want to go beyond sand flea fishing, truly understand how the water works, where the fish are and why, how to position yourself on the right structure, how to make the right decision at the right moment instead of trying in the dark. It's all in high-level fishing. The water game. How to read fresh and salt water and identify productive zones before setting up your equipment. How to use structure, current, and tide to your advantage. Behavioral patterns that allow you to predict where the fish will be. The mindset that separates amateur from high-level angler, because that difference exists, and it's greater than people imagine. The link is in the first pinned comment. Now imagine your next beach fishing trip. The guy next to you has the complete kit, $60 worth of artificial lures in the box, ready for war. You spend 12 minutes at the water's edge with an old sieve. You come back with a full can. You set up a simple rig. You cast past the second break. 15 minutes later, first big one on the styrofoam, then another, then 2 more. The guy next to you will stare intently. He'll walk over to you and ask what you're using. You open the can of coffee with sand, and a bunch of live sand fleas are slithering around. His expression will change. You decide whether to explain everything, just a little, or save that advantage for next time. But what I want to make clear is this. This knowledge has always existed. The fishermen who came before the era of bait shops with shelves full of synthetic products knew exactly what to do with what the beach offered. Not because they had access to the internet or YouTube videos, because they observed, learned from their elders, and passed it on. This cycle was interrupted not because the knowledge stopped working, but because the market learned to profit from the void that forgetfulness creates. And it works. It works very well. It has worked for centuries. Fishing isn't about luck. It never has been. It's about reading the environment. It's about making decisions based on knowledge. It's about knowing what the fish wants before you cast your line. And the sand flea, that 2-centimeter creature that the beach gives you for free and that the law had to regulate because it works so well, is just the tip of the iceberg. What will be different on your next fishing trip now that you know this? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.